Hello, I'm Pastor David Carter, and welcome to what I call the Catalyst Podcast. What we're going to do is always have conversations and topics where we're going to provoke positive change. And so I'm so excited today to have, on my first episode of the Catalyst Podcast, I'm so excited to have Pastor Mark Hampton. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Pastor Carter, and thank you for having me on the Catalyst. And I'm just excited to be here.
Mm-hmm. Now, when the concept came up about Catalyst provoking positive change and being a change agent, I saw that you have an initiative coming up, and we'll talk about that a little later on in the program.
Sure.
But when I saw that you had this program coming up, it was very catalytic, and so I said, I've got to have Pastor Mark come on here. But before we get into your upcoming initiative,
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know a little bit about you, but for our listeners and our viewers, tell them a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, first, I want to tell you, Pastor Carter, I'm from a family of 12. I grew up in...
Y'all had a whole tribe.
Yeah, we had an entire tribe. 8 boys and 4 girls. And a lot of love in the home. My father was a sharecropper from the South. My mother never graduated from high school. She was absolutely brilliant.
Wow, okay.
And my dad was equally brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's in a different time. It's right after the Great Depression for them as young people. And so on. And so the opportunities that we were afforded, they were never afforded those opportunities, but they were absolutely outstanding parents.
But what
what
they did was they didn't have those opportunities. But I know because my situation is very similar. Mm-hmm. They made sacrifices.
Absolutely.
So that we could be in a much different place.
Absolutely.
That's a different kind of generational wealth, right?
It absolutely is. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, we need to turn the page back to that today and grab those rich deposits of examples and then bring them forward in our current day. Mm-hmm. So grew up in that home of 12 kids, was the first among the 12 to go to college.
Okay.
And, I was an athlete. And then after college, just went to work in corporate America and then was in sales for a number of years. Was originally started in banking.
But wait. You said you were an athlete.
Yeah.
I think you're being a little modest there. You're an athlete. What kind of sports did you play?
Well, prior to coming on the show, I shared my brief football career with you at Columbus East High School here in the city of Columbus until one play in a practice that ended my football career. But I went on to play basketball.
Okay. After you got the Brave knocked out of you.
Yeah, after I got the Brave completely knocked out of me. I went on to play tennis, was a city championship tennis player. Mm-hmm. Also played basketball where we won state championship. And then city championship in basketball.
City champion.
I mean,
it kind of happened. So you were like literally a baller.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. I don't know. I guess that's what people would call me back in the day. But anyway, so from there, went on to college, majored in marketing and public relations. Mm-hmm. After college, went to corporate America in banking and worked for Minolta Corporation in sales for a number of years. Then went on to got in the training and development world because I got tired of training all the new salespeople. So I said I may as well be a trainer. Mm-hmm. So I got in the training and development world, did that for years, and was the manager of organizational development for the American Red Cross, which dealt for the Central region with training and development. After that, started my own consulting business, FTO Leadership, which was Follow the Leader. Mm-hmm. And I did leadership training and lectured at colleges and universities all across America. And in the process of all that, wrote about 10 books.
Just a little 10 books. In the process of all that.
Yeah.
So an athlete, one of 12, the first to go to college, an athlete, not an athlete, but a championship athlete, leadership development, training, consulting, the author of 10 books. That's a lifetime for a number of people. I mean, and you could some people would just stop right there. What's kept you going?
Well, I understand, first of all, one of the greatest blessings that we take for granted, and one of the greatest gifts that God gives us is tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so when tomorrow comes, there has to be something that has to be done tomorrow. I was a point guard, predominantly. My job was to solve problems. Mm-hmm. My job was to be a distributor. My job was to call plays. My job was to situationally fix things in real time.
In the moment.
In the moment.
And because I was a point guard also. So
okay. So you get it.
I get it. And so the coach could trust you. You were the coach on the court. On the court. So I get that. Yeah.
So that really translated, and I saw my dad do that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I saw him do that, and it really translated in the rest of my life. So I just have a healthy sense of believing that I could do what needed to be done. And I also have a healthy understanding that if something is going on that is adverse while I'm alive and it's happening on my watch, then I feel a sense of responsibility to do something about it. I'm not the guy that just sits back on the sideline
and watch it happen.
No, I can't do that.
In the moment, because you are a momentum and an atmosphere shifter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As you know, I say, you know, in the church that I pastor, Worship Center of Central Ohio,
Great church.
Thank you, sir. Don't be a thermometer.
Right.
Be a thermostat.
Absolutely.
Change the environment. Be a catalyst. Yeah. Be a change agent. Yeah.
See, my mother taught me, you know, I went to a university right in my home, quite honestly.
Home you.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it was. My mother taught me a very powerful principle. And she would always say this to me because she refused to allow me to have excuses.
Yeah.
Or to make them. Either to have an excuse or to make one.
Yeah.
She would always say this. She said, Mark, take whatever you have and make what you want out of it. So I always had a healthy sense that if something was going on that needed to be changed, that was what I had. I need to turn that thing into what I want it to be.
And so that's what you're kind of doing now. And so one of the things I know about you, you are the executive pastor.
Yes, that's correct.
Of Fresh Start Worship Center.
Yes.
And who might be the pastor of that great religious institution?
I think you might know her. Her name is Apostle Nikki Hampton, my wife. Yeah, phenomenal.
Listen, phenomenal. And I don't know if you know this, but one of her very dear friends from Columbus, Dr. Andrea Reed.
Yeah.
She and I went to college together at Brown University.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Andy is one of my, she was one of my, she would hold me down and try and keep me holy.
Right.
Back in those days. So talk a little about your, and then we're going to get into the summit that you have coming up. Talk a little bit about your role in the church.
Well, my role in the church as the executive pastor is to do, number one, is to make sure that what God has given the pastor actually gets done. I'm a relationship guy, so I manage many of the relationships and build on those relationships around the vision and calibrate our attractiveness or our attitude around what we need to accomplish vision-wise.
So part of you assist and help the pastor
absolutely
get things done. I'm going to throw a little curveball here, right?
Yeah.
The pastor is your wife.
Absolutely.
And her is a female.
Right.
How does that dynamic work? See, when I came to Columbus, I was pastor at Second Baptist Church.
Right.
And I grew up in the East Coast where women preachers wasn't an issue.
Right.
It was not something that we looked at as something that was strange. Came out here and I inherited the church, and on ministerial staff was a female preacher. And one of the old guard came up to me and said, "Hey, what you gonna do with that woman preacher?" Wow. And I said, "I'm gonna let her preach."
Right.
Duh. Right.
Yeah.
And so knowing coming into that climate, and here you are a strong black man with a wife as the pastor. How does that dynamic work when the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church, which is all biblical? But this whole dynamic, and you being the strong, accomplished black man as you are, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I didn't have the problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was other people
as
who
for
had the
you
problem.
in your house, and you're serving the Lord. No, seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, because at home, I'm the husband of Apostle Nikki Hampton.
And I know she'd say that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm the husband of her. And as a man of faith, I understand that she is not my idea. She's my dream, but she is his idea.
Oh, you better talk that talk.
Do you understand? And everything that she does, she is getting it from him, and it is all his idea. Now, there are those in the community who had issue with it. This is an intriguing conversation, really. I'm kind of glad you brought it up because I've never had an opportunity to talk about this. You would be amazed at how many people who thought that I was the senior pastor. And when they thought I was a senior pastor, they were quick and fast to give me their phone numbers, email addresses.
What's up, Doc? Hey,
want to go to lunch.
let's get together, Doc.
Let's get together, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yes.
All right. Once they find out that she is the senior pastor, it was literally the last I heard of him. Now, like you said, I'm a strong black man. I had to be strong from a family of 12. Okay. I had to be strong.
So where were you in the order, in the pecking order of?
You know what? God divinely dropped me in as the 7th son.
Come on
and
now.
the 11th child.
Bro, you better go ahead.
He dropped me in there. Okay.
He ordered you.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
yeah, he did. He did.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that people struggled with that, but I didn't have a problem with it. Now, for that meant a lot of isolation on my part.
God does.
You got to be able to handle
He does his best work
in isolation.
in isolation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I had to be able to handle that. And not allow that to throw me off or misdirect my behavior or to get into an ascension mindset, which meant my aspirations would run ahead of what my responsibilities were as the executive pastor. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get you.
And so I've learned that God's vision must ride first class, and I always ride coach. So I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with what God was ordering because I knew that he was ordering it. Now, what a lot of people also don't know is I remember when my wife was singing in the choir at First Church of God on worship teams. And we had a music ministry for a number of years. And we traveled and toured and did all that stuff, you know. And I would always tell her, you're more than just a singer. God is called, because she would, when she ministered musically, she would start preaching. And I would say, oh my God.
And see, I know Apostle Nikki, and she is a gifted psalmist, but she is the Lord's preacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I saw that early on, you know, and I even had a meeting, you know, with her dad and her brother. And I said, you know what? The reality is she's going further than all of us. So we need to get behind her. That meeting was over 20 years ago. So it never bothered me. That
as much as it bothered
other folks. I could care less because if I misappropriate my thinking and my attitude about what God was doing, it would derail.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I had no problem with what God was doing.
And see, you have to be very secure in who you are.
Absolutely.
Okay. Very secure in who the Lord had called you to be and where he placed you. And we are help meets.
Absolutely.
For divine purposes.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I really wanted to talk about that because understanding the climate and the isolationism that comes about as a result of making decisions as it relates to doing the God thing and not the popular cultural thing. And with you being the strong black man that you are, as we, you know, kind of transition into the initiative that you have coming out, I want to read an excerpt from a book called Dancing in the Darkness, Spiritual Lessons for Thriving in Turbulent Times. And this is written by Dr. Otis Moss III. And if you haven't gotten this book, you know, y'all need to get it. Incidentally, he was my classmate at Yale Divinity School.
Okay, got it.
And his father was Otis Moss II,
Yeah.
who was a general
Yeah.
with Dr. Martin Luther King. So all those kind of things, work together. And speaking about the climate and the turbulent times in which we're in, and the summit that you have coming up, I want you to listen to this, and then we can talk about, and then the floor is yours to talk about the summit. He writes a letter to his son because in 2016, he was concerned about the turbulent times and the political climate and social climate. Sure. This is what he writes. He said to his son, he said, "Dear Elijah, what shall I tell you? Shall I tell you that your rights are protected and racism is a scourge now banished from society? Shall I tell you that in this country you are entitled to act and live as any other teenage boy, to dance playfully with minor mischief, and to speak with a quick, immature tongue? Shall I tell you that your body is safe, your mind valued, your future free? If I tell you these things, my words will be perjury before God and an assault upon the memory of our ancestors.
Wow. So
today I must share a hard truth with you. The truth, my son, is that you are not safe. You are not valued by certain others because of their persistent melanin phobia. There's nothing wrong with you, but there's something wrong with adults who cling to myths created to maintain power and control. You do not yet have the right to be a frolicking teenager like other children in our community, for your boisterous actions might be misconstrued as a fearful threat by people who refuse to remove the racialized lens from their eyes. The truth, my son, is that you are not safe. But we can still thrive in turbulent times.
Absolutely.
And dance in spiritual darkness. So in light of that, Pastor Mark, tell us about the Vergiwi, did I say it right? Vergiwi.
Yeah.
Vergiwi Summit.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that the Vergiwi Summit, the name Vergiwi in African means forgiven. So that's the first piece.
Okay.
The
Forgiven.
second, the summit is absolutely not my idea. It is God's idea.
I was going to say, whose idea might it be?
It's God's idea. That great apostle that you and I have been talking about, Apostle Nikki Hampton, she was preaching a message in Psalm 85 about 7 months ago. And there was a question that arose in Psalms 85. And that question was, will thou revive us again? That question haunted me. And it haunted me for this reason. I've been looking at us as a community, not through incident, not through Trayvon Martin or George Floyd or Evander Tuskill or Sandra Bland, not through any of those incidences. And incidences is really a misappropriation of language. It really is, because it's far greater than that. But I look at it through discography over time. For me, that's 50 years. That's 5 decades.
Whoa.
So that's how I look at the issue. Since the time I started paying attention to these things.
Paying attention to the cycles.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Correct. You have, all of us in our upbringing, we have that thing that happens to us when we discover it's different to be kissed by the sun. It's different to be clothed in blackness. We have those moments that life is not going to be fair. One of those moments that you just read is a father writing to his son, and he's telling him, you're not safe. That's a moment.
Catalytic moments.
Yeah,
things
absolutely.
that make the shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the watershed moments.
Absolutely. So at the age of 9, I was beaten up in 69? I was beaten up by some white school kids because I was playing with another white school kid. And we had a good time at recess. And after school, some other white kids didn't like the fact that we had a good time.
Yeah.
And so they pulled me aside behind the school building and beat me up. I learned then that being black was going to be different. But I wasn't thinking yet. I just knew this thing had happened to me. All of us have had that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Something along that
Something
line.
similar.
Yeah.
So we all have a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So when I look, so about 12 is when I started paying attention because I saw the police beat up my uncle right in front of my home. And he worked for the city of Columbus. At the time, he was the head of the janitorial for the city. And he was just on his way home, and he asked the officer, "What did I do?" And he put his hands up, and he was just saying, "Officers, just please tell me, what did I do?" And they beat him up. And literally, he's like 6'3", 6'4", 225, 230. They picked him up and threw him in the back of a car. And that moment seared in my, the inequity was seared in my brain. Like, wait a minute. This could happen to me. You know what I mean? So that affected me. Now, so those are just some foundational impressions.
Okay, get it.
That give you a mindset, and I'm taking a long way home, but it gives you a mindset about, it creates a mindset rather, about the fact that you are not safe. And what it can do, and what it does initially, out of the goodwill of our parents who would teach us lessons like, be in the house before the lights go out, street lights come on, because bad things happen to black folks at night.
At night, yeah.
Don't go in that neighborhood because they don't like us over there. That meant don't go into white neighborhoods, all right? So what happens is you develop somewhat of a victim's mentality. And your parents are not creating that in you. They love you, and they're trying to keep you alive.
They want to keep you safe. They want you to come home.
Right. They want us to come home.
Yeah.
And they have experienced.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What they're trying to keep us from never experiencing. That's really important to understand. So the whole victim mindset happens to us. But then there's a point that you have to crawl out of that box. There's a point where you have to say, you know what? I don't care, but I've got to move forward. I still have to have vision. I still have to dream. I still have to, despite the issues, I still have to be successful. I still have to start a family. I still have to buy a home. I still have to do all those things, start a business, whatever the case may be. And the reality is that I came to the conclusion that racism cannot be my big problem. Because if it is, then that means that I have no control over my present or my future. And my grandchildren will have no control over their children, and grandchildren will have no control over their present or their future. So I've got to get myself out of that mindset and say that I am absolutely in control. I just understand that there are minefields.
Yes. So
you understand what I'm saying?
In this book, Dr. Moss talks about chaos. And sometimes when you see chaos, rather than running and disengaging, you should pause, look at the chaos, and then find a way to control the sanctification that the chaos gave you.
Absolutely.
Right? And then create something awesome as a result of the turbulent times. And I think what you're saying is the Virgiwi Summit, forgiven, right? That, and you, out of that, can this be revived? And so who's being revived? What will the summit do? What's its purpose? What's its goal? Tell me about it.
I told you I'm taking the long way.
Okay.
So, but you know, the fastest way to get somewhere is very slow.
You say that again?
The fastest way to get somewhere meaningful is slow. Because if you go too fast, you miss too much stuff. All right,
and
so
you're missing
you don't
exit
see, and you miss the scenery. Of it, the panoramic scenery of it. So anyway, to get straight to the point. So after looking at these over 5 decades, seeing the shift, I came to a conclusion that in many regards we are overcommitted on this discussion of racism in America. And I'll tell you why I think we are overcommitted on it. We're overcommitted to our own trauma. And the generational trauma of racism. We are a little bit too overcommitted on it. And many would say, what in the world do you mean by that? How can you possibly say that in light of George Floyd and many other things that have happened? The reason why I can say that is because if my grandfather, born in 1901, couldn't vote until 1965. He lived here for 65 years, paid taxes, was an entrepreneur, and could not vote until he was 65 years old. If he had been born in 1961 like I was, he'd be a millionaire today. Maybe a billionaire.
And
you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see,
overcommitted and focused on the wrong.
Yeah. And so
and all that energy is going to something
that I can't change. Okay, so here is my conclusion that I've come to after understanding that, wait, we may be overcommitted. So I need to shift that commitment toward not what has happened to me, but more importantly, to look at what we are doing to each other and understand the social and psychological fallout of why this is here. We can find its roots. Sure, its roots are in systemic racism, but at some point I have to be able to say, you know what, it did happen to us, but it can't keep happening to us. Legislatively, right now, we are beyond that. To some degree. To
some degree, yeah.
Okay, not completely.
We can dialogue about that.
We could.
Yeah.
But the reality is I have enough to work with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let me say that again.
What is it that you have in your hand?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have enough to work with to make, and remembering what my mother taught me, Mark, take what you have and make what you want out of it. So from that perspective, I began to shift my attention away from what was being done to me to what we were doing to each other, and then rebuild that, because there was a time when we did not do the things to each other that we are doing today at the level in which we are doing them today.
Who's the we?
So for example, in 1961, when I was born, only 13% of all black children were born to a single mother. If we look today, that number is 74%. What does that tell us? That there's a problem between the black man and the black woman. And we really don't talk about it. And so, and the reality is that we don't look at this, that another example, if a child does not have a direct relationship with their father within the first 12 months of that child's life, it is likely they will never be fathered by that father. In addition to that, so what is the fallout of that? Right now, children from 5 to 13, all right, listen to this, 30% of them have never even been to a church of black children.
And you know, with us, in our generation,
the church was foundational.
Yeah, we had. I tell people we had a drug problem, right? Because our parents drug us to church. It wasn't a choice.
No option.
No option. Yeah.
So as I looked at this, as I looked at our discography of racism, the target move, what we are doing to each other, I came to a conclusion. Do I fight that, or do I really deal with us?
Yeah.
And I asked myself, which one of these can I control?
Pick your battles.
Pick your battle.
Yeah.
Look, this is what the conclusion that I've come to. I don't like snow, so I wear a hat. I don't like snow, so I wear a coat.
You don't like snow because you're bald-headed.
That too.
We're in the same club.
Yeah, we're the same. Right? I don't like snow, right? So I make sure my gas bill is paid, especially in the wintertime. I don't like snow because snow will be here when I'm dead and gone. Well, it was here when I was born. It'll be here when I'm dead and gone. And there's absolutely nothing I can do about snow. And guess what? There's absolutely nothing I can do about racism, because racism is snow. It was here before I was born, and it'll be here after I'm born. So there's no point in me spending my eggs and my energy and my time and my intellectual capital dealing with racism when I'm looking at black men who are killing black men right now. In 2022, 9,000 black men were murdered at the hand of other black men in America. And that is a pandemic in itself. And the reality is, if I'm really going to be in this fight, if I'm going to hear God, okay, and then change has to begin with us. I'm not going to focus on racism as much. There are people to do that. I'm acutely aware. I get it. I was in college, had a sign put on my dorm, Klan meeting in the morning. I understand the discography. I've seen it in corporate America, all over the place. All right. But the reality is, it's snow. I can't change it. But what I can change is how we interact with each other, and that's what I want to focus on. Now, to your point, I know you want to say, to your point. So I asked God from that message that Apostle preached, and that question, that interrogative that came up, will thou revive us again? That question haunted me, and I asked God in that moment, in that catalytic moment, I asked God this: God, will you, with tears in my eyes, God, will you revive us again? I'm talking about black folks, black males in particular. I asked him, will you revive us again? You know what he said? He said, yes, and I want to. I heard that in the affirmative, and from that point on, I began to write and to listen and to write and to listen for 2 or 3 months before I opened my mouth to share it with anybody. Just write and listen. And he began to give me the details and the strategy. He said, since this stuff is shrouded in blackness, I want you to find out what the word, what is an African word for forgiven. Found out it was Virgiwi. He said, call it that, the Virgiwi Summit. And so we're reaching black males from the age of 9 to 90, because black on black crime. We have to deal with the eschatology of it. We have to deal with the generational components of it from 9 to 90. And not only that, he said this: everything you've ever done and all I've ever required of you as human beings is that you make a decision. We've asked black males to come to our midnight basketball. We've asked them to come to our mentoring programs. We've asked them to come to our job fairs.
And they've come. Yeah.
All right? And the problems continue to escalate. He said, you know what? He said, you've never asked them to make a decision to live. And so the Virgiwi Summit is to gather 500 to 1,000 black males in one room and ask them to do one thing: to make a decision to live. So everything that we do, all of the interviews, the website, all of the details, the strategic plan, all of that is for about 45 seconds when we ask them the question, do you want to live or do you want to die? And when we ask them that question, I just believe that they're smart enough to choose the yes.
I set before you death and life. What you going to choose?
That's right.
You're going to choose.
That's right.
So when is the summit, sir?
Yeah, April 14th.
April 14th?
It's April 14th, 7 p.m. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. at Hope City House of Prayer on El Paso Drive on the west side of Columbus.
Pastor Mark, I think this is going to be a catalytic moment where something is introduced into a situation and circumstance that's going to speed and bring about significant change. And once that happens, the people, it'll be transformational.
Yes.
And they'll never be able to be the same again.
Yes.
Because they've been altered in a positive way. They'll see themselves differently, and they'll see that making a choice to live, and then decisions, and the moment-by-moment decisions they make
transforms
their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you this too, Pastor Carter. This is so. I'll tell you, man. God also gave me the date for the summit. I was going to do it a week before. He said, "Don't do it on the 7th. Do it on the 14th." And I rarely ask God why.
Yeah.
I said, "But show me this." He said, research why the 14th is, why that date is significant. Research it. What happened on the 14th? Well, 117 years to the day, the Azusa Street revival happened. Now, you got to understand something. I didn't know that. I'm getting chills sitting here thinking about it right now. I did not know that at the time he gave me the date. That's why he had me go research it. It's 117 years to the day of the Azusa Street revival. So once he showed me that, I understood that this wasn't, I got to call it a summit to not be spooky. But I need you to know that it's bigger than a summit. This is a schedule. God scheduled this. Heaven scheduled this. This is not my idea. I am not that smart to pick that day to pull all of this. And everyone that I've asked to be involved in the summit or to give or donate or whatever, we have not received one no.
And just
not one.
And just to put a bow on this, at my church, since I've been back, I've been preaching on the book of Nehemiah. How Nehemiah he heard about a problem that was going on, in Jerusalem, that the walls had fallen down. The temple was a wreck. Nehemiah had a burden for it once he heard it. He got in his feelings. He cried, but then he prayed. He prayed. And after 4 months, that's when he went back to the king. After he prayed, and then God gave him strategy, gave him vision. Now, 117 rounded up is 120. The walls of Jerusalem had laid dormant in that situation for 120 years.
Wow.
And Nehemiah heard, got a burden, then he took action. He got plans from the Lord, and they rebuilt the wall in 52 days, where they'd been lying dormant and dilapidated for 120 years. So I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to encourage you with this.
Wow.
And I'll also say it couldn't have been on the 7th, because April 7th is the day that we celebrate him getting up, right? 7 days later. Come on, man. 7 days later.
That's right.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Operating in the power of the resurrection. So as I'm closing, Vergiwi means forgiven. Right? And before you can build yourself, you got to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I didn't know that Vergiwi meant forgiven in Africa. But I'm like, what does Vergiwi mean? Vergiwi? We are on the verge of doing something.
Wait a minute.
We are on the verge.
Look, I mean, it's worship center now, but you got to understand something. I came up in the Baptist church. I know where to...
We are on the verge of something that's going to be transformative and impactful.
Praise God.
Generationally, something that is going to be remembered like Azusa, like the wall, because you got a vision from the Lord. Yeah. So we're forgiven, and now we are on the verge of something sensational. Yeah. Pastor Mark, brother, shake my hand.
Man, thank you.
I'm honored, man, that you'd be here. And the Catalyst Podcast, we're provoking positive change. Yeah. Thank you for being with us, man. I appreciate you.
Hey, I'm just so glad to have been here, and thank you for sharing those powerful ending words that mean life to me, man.
We're on the verge.
Yes, we are. I'm taking that back to the team.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm taking that back to the team. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Catalyst Podcast. And if you enjoyed it, and I really hope you did, I need you to do several things for me. Number 1, leave us a 5-star review. Number 2, like it and comment on the podcast. And number 3, share it with as many of your family and friends as possible, as this will help the podcast grow and will allow us to continue to have conversations that will provoke positive change. This is David Carter for David Carter's Catalyst Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Catalyst Podcast is a production of Yamo Media. The producer and editor of this podcast is Adam Dell. Thank you so much to Mark Hampton for coming in and joining us for this first episode. For more information on Yamo Media and the Yamo Media Podcast Network, find our YouTube page at Yamo Media Columbus.